In the desert, Simba has fallen under the intensity and a gathering of vultures slides on him. Out of nowhere, a meerkat and a warthog rush into them, kicking them away as a component of their number one game, bowling for vultures. The warthog, Pumbaa, Ernie Sabella, then, at that point, finds Simba and carries him to the consideration of his meerkat sidekick, Timon, Nathan Path. Timon is at first terrified of the youthful lion, however Pumbaa states that he's nearly nothing and will grow up to be their ally, as opposed to eating them. Timon laughs at the thought, prior to recommending exactly the same thing as his own. Pumbaa gets Simba and conveys him into the shade where he's restored. Simba says thanks to them for their assistance prior to leaving. Timon and Pumbaa show compassion for him, and that's what let him know, whatever happened to him, he needs to get his previous behind him, referring to their proverb Hakuna Matata, no problem. They then welcome Simba to remain with them as an individual outsider in their wilderness heaven, and train him to eat messes with as opposed to meat. Simba starts to encourage and in the long run develops into a sound, light-hearted grown-up, Matthew Broderick. In the interim, the Pride grounds have been diminished to a no-man's land under Scar's rule. Zazu is restricted to a bone enclosure singing while Scar languidly lies about biting on bones. Zazu mumbles faintly that he never needed to do this under Mufasa. Scar reels on the name, referring that the law is to never refer to Mufasa's name. Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed show up, whining that food and water have become scant and that the lionesses will not chase them. Scar proposes they eat Zazu as Banzai neglects Mufasa's name before he revises himself under Scar's glare. Scar then excuses them. Back in the wilderness, Simba, Timon, and Pumbaa rest together after a dinner of bugs to gaze toward the night sky. Pumbaa asks what the shining lights overhead are, to which Timon answers that they're fireflies that stalled out in the huge, somewhat blue dark thing. Pumbaa says he'd continuously thought they were consuming wads of gas billions of miles away, a hypothesis that Timon exposes because of Pumbaa's pompous nature. They ask Simba about his thought process. Noting just to their asking, he says he was once informed that the looking after them. Timon fires laughing out loud over the possibility of illustrious dead folks watching them, yet Simba strays, disheartened over the memory of his dad. He murmurs and falls onto a lot of wild blossoms, spreading their petals, and passing on to the breeze. The breeze conveys them back to the Pride terrains where Rafiki, sitting on his tree, snatches them. He takes them back into the tree where he sniffs them and thinks about the obvious natural smell. Unexpectedly it strikes him, Simba should be alive. Frenzied with bliss, he rapidly spreads a manet around the top of his Simba drawing, expressing that the time has come. Timon and Pumbaa are strolling through the wilderness together when Pumbaa becomes diverted by an enormous rhino creepy crawly. Hungry, he follows it to the edge of the wilderness and surprises it as it roosted on a log confronting some prairie. His eye then finds something in the tall grass as the creepy crawly takes off. Pumbaa shouts as a lioness rises out of the grasses and gives pursuit. Hearing Pumbaa, Timon comes running and finds him trapped in the underlying found. He attempts to free Pumbaa as the lioness moves nearer. She jumps forward, however Simba hops in and starts to battle with her while Timon applauds him. He attempts to wreck her, however she flips him over and pins him to the ground. Simba perceives this move and his close buddy, Nala, Moira Kelly. At the point when he uncovers himself, Nala is stunned and glad to see him once more. Simba acquaints her with Pumbaa and Timon, who is exactly upset about the gathering since Nala had attempted to eat Pumbaa. Nala lets Simba know that everybody in the Pride terrains thought he was dead after Scar educated them concerning the rush. Anxious, Simba asks what else Scar told them, yet Nala says that it doesn't make any difference now that he's alive and the legitimate lord. Simba pardons Timon and Pumbaa to address Nala alone. As they stroll through the wilderness together, the heartfelt settings energize their affection for one another. However, Simba is reluctant to converse with Nala about his past. She attempts to get Simba to return to the Pride terrains with her, letting him know that everything has fallen into disorder since Scar took the privileged position. He declines, making sense that he shouldn't stress over things that occurred previously, which enrages Nala. She lets Simba know that getting back to the privileged position is his obligation, however he stomps off and leaves the wilderness to an open field. He attempts to legitimize his choice before hollering at the night sky that Mufasa wasn't there for himself and feeling serious that it was his shortcoming. He then hears singing coming from a tree behind him and sees Rafiki in the branches. Disturbed, he leaves. Rafiki follows him and poses him with a progression of explanatory inquiries and reciting outlandish words. Persuaded that the primate is insane and confounded, Simba dismisses to walk when Rafiki uncovers that he realizes Simba is Mufasa's child. Rafiki then, at that point, runs off and Simba follows. He finds Rafiki intervening on a stone and inquires as to whether he knew his dad. Rafiki says, "I know your dad," to which Simba answers that he passed on. Rafiki giggles, saying that Mufasa is alive, and drives Simba through a shrubbery of trees and plants. They stop at a reflecting pool and Rafiki trains Simba to investigate it. Seeing just his appearance from the get-go, Simba looks harder and sees a picture of Mufasa. Rafiki says that Mufasa lives inside him as a huge tempest cloud shows up above and a ghost of Mufasa stands up to Simba, saying that he has failed to remember what his identity is, and that he should assume Pride Rock. Simba asks his dad to remain, however the phantom vanishes, repeating that Simba should recollect what his identity is. As Simba thinks about the message and the adjustment of the breezes, Rafiki pummels him over the head with his staff. Offended and in torment, Simba asks what he did that for. Rafiki says that it doesn't make any difference because before, however, the past might in any case hurt, and one can either run from it or gain from it. He swings his staff once more and Simba ducks before getting the staff and discarding it. Then Rafiki watches and cheers as Simba runs off. It is returning to report that Timon and Pumbaa are resting together as Nala approaches them and pushes them conscious, terrifying them right away. She inquires as to whether they've seen Simba yet. Rafiki shows up above and proclaims that the ruler has returned. Befuddled by this assertion and Rafiki's secretive appearance and flight, Timon and Pumbaa tune in as Nala attempts to make sense of that Simba has chosen to return to the Pride terrains to have his spot as ruler. Crossing the desert, Simba shows up in the Pride grounds to think that it is dull and fruitless. He eyes Pride Rock with a look of retribution when Nala, Timon, and Pumbaa show up next to him. They all consent to assist Simba with recovering the high position. However, Timon is not exactly dazzled by the scene they're battling for. They slip over to Pride Rock and find that it's slithering with hyenas. Simba offers Timon and Pumbaa as live snares and they do give a bright show for the eager hyenas while he and Nala draw nearer. Simba trains Nala to energize the lionesses while he searches for Scar. He finds him at the foundation of Pride Rock, calling uproariously for Sarabi. Hyenas nip at her heels as she draws near and Simba looks on forlornly. Scar questions her regarding the reason why the lionesses will not chase. Sarabi makes sense that the groups have continued and their main opportunity for endurance is to leave Pride Rock. Scar rejects and, when Sarabi analyzes him to Mufasa, he mercilessly hits her. Having sufficiently seen, Simba shows up on an edge and gets down to comfort his mom. Scar steps back, unfortunate that Mufasa has returned, yet when he understands who it truly is, he shoots a disdainful frown at Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed. Simba stands up to Scar, requesting that he step down from the privileged position or battle. However, shrewd Scar inquires as to why things should end in brutality, and says he would feel horrendous on the off chance that he was liable for the demise of a relative. However, Simba says he's put the previous behind him, and Scar questions whether the lionesses have done likewise. At the point when Nala questions this, Scar prompts Simba to let them know all who was liable for Mufasa's passing. Unfortunately, Simba admits that he was, however, it was a mishap. Scar utilizes this and blames Simba for being a killer, upholding him to the furthest limit of Pride Rock where Simba slips past the brink, hanging by his paws. Lightning strikes and touches off a fire underneath him as Scar investigates him, commenting that this was only how Mufasa looked before he passed. Then, at that point, Scar gets Simba's paws and murmurs in his ear that he was the one to kill Mufasa. Irritated, Simba jumps past the brink and pins Scar, stifling him to admit reality to the lionesses. Battling quickly breaks out between the hyenas and the lions. Timon and Pumbaa get the conflict together with their particular bowling moves and Rafiki dazzles for certain aerobatic combative techniques. At the point when Timon is cornered by Shenzi and Banzai in the lion's lair with Zazu, Pumbaa acts as the hero, his fierceness incited when Banzai unintentionally calls him a pig. Scar figures out how to get away from the battle yet are trailed by Simba. They meet at the highest point of Pride Rock encompassed by blazes where Scar asks for his life, saying that his family and that the hyenas are the genuine foe. Having heard this, the hyenas step back snarling. Simba yields, saying that dislikes Scar, and advises him to take off and stay away forever. Scar compliantly strolls past him, however sends a heap of coals into Simba's face, blinding him briefly. Scar then goes after Simba and a savage battle results. Scar figures out how to wreck Simba and jumps at him, be that as it may, utilizing the method Nala had dominated in her sticking. Simba flips Scar with his rear legs past the brink of Pride Rock. Scar tumbles down the stone face and terrain at the base. He drowsily stands up and sees the hyenas moving toward him from between the blazes. He welcomes them as his companions, however they answer that he said foe. Scar views them with sickening dread as they lick their lips and encompass him before going after him. Downpour starts to fall and Simba gets back to the lionesses where he welcomes his mom and Nala. Rafiki clatters his staff and focuses it toward the tip of Pride Rock. He retires, who gives him an embrace, and says the time has come. As everybody watches, and as the downpour washes away residue and bones, Simba rises to Pride Rock, looking one final time at the sky before letting out a powerful thunder and fixing his situation as ruler. The lionesses participate, hailing their new ruler. Sometime later, the creatures of the Pride grounds accumulate indeed at Pride Rock, cheering at Simba and Nala as they ignore the realm. Rafiki interferes with them and holds up their infant fledgling so anyone might